The first scream died in Willow Reed's throat as Aaron Blackburn's fist connected with her cheekbone, sending her sprawling across the rough-hewn floorboards of the remote cabin. Montana Territory, 1873, was unforgiving to most, but especially to women with nowhere to turn. 6 months, she'd endured this marriage, a marriage arranged by desperate parents who died of fever before witnessing the monster their daughter had been shackled to. "You burnt the stew again," Aaron snarled, looming over her trembling form, his shadow stretching across the floor like a harbinger of the pain to come. "Can't cook, can't clean proper. What good are you?" Willow's fingers brushed the growing bruise on her face. At 22, her once bright eyes had dulled, her spirit nearly broken. The isolated cabin, 15 miles from the nearest town of Pinecrest, had become her prison. Aaron controlled everything: the horses, the wagon, the rifle, and her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words bitter and familiar on her tongue. "The fire was acting up, I'll do better." Aaron grunted, turning away to grab his bottle of whiskey. "See that you do. I'm riding out tomorrow, cattle buyer coming through. I'll be gone 3 days. When I get back, this place better be spotless." Willow nodded, her mind already racing. 3 days, 3 whole days without him. As he drank himself into a stupor that night, she watched him through lowered lashes, planning with every breath. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Willow slid from their bed. Aaron's snores rattled the cabin walls as she silently gathered what she could: a worn dress, a thin shawl, the hidden locket containing a curl of her mother's hair, and the biscuits she'd secreted away over the past 2 weeks. No money. Aaron never let her touch a cent. No horse. He'd know immediately. But her legs were strong, and desperation made for a powerful compass. Willow paused at the door, heart hammering against her ribs. 6 months of beatings, of cruel words, of violations in the night. 6 months of isolation and fear. She placed her wedding ring on the table. Then she ran. The spring air bit through her threadbare clothing as she stumbled through the dense forest surrounding their cabin. She stuck to game trails, avoiding the main road where Aaron might spot her if he woke early. By midday, her feet were bleeding inside her boots, but the pain barely registered against her determination. At dusk, she reached Everett Creek, its waters swollen with spring runoff. Willow hesitated only a moment before wading in, gasping at the icy grip that clutched her legs. The current pushed against her, threatening to sweep her away, but she fought forward. One desperate step after another on the opposite bank, she collapsed, soaked and shivering, but free. For now, Willow forced herself onward, knowing Aaron would be coming for her. She'd heard stories from town when Aaron had gotten drunk, stories of what happened to runaway wives. Willow had no illusions she was considered property, and Aaron Blackburn wasn't a man to let his property escape. The next morning brought exhaustion and hunger, but also her first glimpse of salvation: a small ranch nestled in a verdant valley. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a corral of horses milled about in the early light. Willow hesitated at the edge of the trees. The owner might send her right back to Aaron, might be cut from the same cloth as her husband. But her options were dwindling with her strength. She'd nearly convinced herself to move on when a shot rang out, sending her diving back into the undergrowth. Heart pounding, she peered through the branches to see a tall man emerging from the barn, rifle held loosely in his hands. He'd fired into the air, scaring off a coyote that had been eyeing his chickens. "Damn varmint," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "That's the 3rd time this week." The man moved with an easy confidence, placing the rifle against the fence before returning to his chores. From her hiding place, Willow studied him: broad-shouldered, light brown hair falling over his forehead, face tanned from outdoor work. Not much older than her own 22 years, perhaps 27 or 28, hunger and desperation finally won out over caution. Willow gathered her courage and stepped into the clearing, wobbling on exhausted legs. "Hello there," she called weakly, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. The man spun around, reaching instinctively for his rifle before stopping short at the sight of her. His eyes, a startling shade of green, widened as they took in her bedraggled appearance, the bruise flowering across her cheekbone. "Madam," he questioned, approaching slowly as if she were a spooked horse. "You all right?" Willow opened her mouth to answer, but the world suddenly tilted sideways. She was distantly aware of strong arms catching her before darkness claimed her completely. She woke to warmth, real warmth from a proper fire, not the meager flames Aaron allowed to conserve wood. Willow blinked, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling and the soft quilt beneath her fingers. "You're awake," came a gentle voice. Willow turned her head to find the man from earlier sitting in a chair beside the bed, a book open on his lap. Up close, his features were even more striking, kind eyes set in a face that spoke of hard work and decent living. "Water," he offered, holding out a tin cup. She took it gratefully, her fingers trembling slightly. After a few sips, she found her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Isaiah." "Grant Isaiah." He set his book aside. "And you are—" Willow hesitated, fear flashing through her if she gave her real name and Aaron came looking. "Emma," she lied. "Emma Wilson." Grant's eyes narrowed slightly, as if sensing the falsehood, but he nodded. "Well, Miss Wilson, you gave me quite a scare. You've been out nearly 5 hours." 5 hours. Willow tried to sit up too quickly, wincing as her body protested. "Easy now," Grant said, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here." The simple phrase, spoken with such quiet assurance, nearly undid her. "When was the last time she'd felt safe? I can't stay," she whispered. "I need to keep moving." "Running from something?" Grant asked, his gaze falling to the fading bruise on her face. When she didn't answer, he sighed. "Look, Miss Wilson, I don't know your story and you don't have to tell it, but you're in no shape to travel. At least stay until you've got your strength back." Willow wanted to protest, but exhaustion pulled at her limbs like lead weights. She nodded weakly. "Good," Grant said, standing. "I'll fix you something to eat, then we can talk or not, whatever you prefer." As he moved about the cabin, Willow took in her surroundings. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well kept. Books lined rough-hewn shelves, a testament to a mind that sought more than just survival. A small desk held papers and what looked like sketches. The furnishings were simple but sturdy. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his home. Grant returned with a bowl of stew that made Willow's mouth water. "It's venison," he explained, placing it on a small table beside the bed. "Shot the buck myself last week." The first spoonful nearly brought tears to her eyes. It had been so long since she'd eaten food prepared with care rather than fear. Grant sat quietly, allowing her to eat in peace. "You live here alone?" she asked finally, setting the empty bowl aside. Grant nodded. "Just me and the animals. My folks passed on a few years back, left me the place." A shadow crossed his face. "My brother used to help, but he headed west after the war. Haven't heard from him since '69. "I'm sorry," Willow said softly. Grant shrugged. "Life deals its cards. We play the hand we're given." His gaze returned to her bruise. "Some hands are harder than others, though." Willow looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. "Well," Grant continued, taking her empty bowl, "you need rest. I'll bed down in the barn tonight." "You take the house." "Oh no, I couldn't, Miss Wilson," he interrupted gently. "I insist. Whatever you're running from, you deserve one night of peace." The kindness in his voice threatened to break the dam of emotions she'd built so carefully. Willow merely nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After Grant left, she lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house that held no threats. For the first time in months, she slept without fear. Morning brought the smell of coffee and bacon. Willow found her dress washed and dried, folded neatly on a chair. Her boots had been cleaned and set beside it. These small kindnesses, so foreign after months with Aaron, made her throat tighten. When she emerged from the bedroom, dressed but still weary, Grant was at the stove. He turned, offering a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Morning," he greeted. "Hungry, starving," she admitted, settling cautiously at the table. They ate in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through windows that Aaron would have considered a waste of glass. Grant didn't press her for information, instead telling her about his ranch, the horses he was training, the small herd of cattle he managed, his plans to expand. "I could use help around here," he said casually, pouring more coffee. "If you're looking for work." Willow stiffened. "What kind of help?" Understanding flickered in Grant's eyes. "Honest help," he assured her. "Cooking, maybe tending the garden. I'm hopeless with anything green that isn't grass for grazing." He gestured to the withered remnants of last year's kitchen garden visible through the window. I can offer room, board, and fair wages. Willow studied him, searching for deceit or hidden intent. She found only earnestness. Why would you help me? She asked softly. You don't know me. Grant considered this, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. My ma used to say God puts people in our path for a reason. Maybe you need a safe harbor, and maybe I need someone who can grow a decent tomato. His smile was gentle. The offer stands, but only if you want it. Willow knew she should keep moving, put more distance between herself and Aaron. But something about Grant Isaiah's quiet strength called to her battered soul. I'd like to stay, she whispered. For a while, the days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt alien in its normalcy. Grant worked from sunup to sundown, tending his land and animals with a dedication that impressed Willow. He never raised his voice, never showed impatience with the stubborn mare he was breaking or the fence post that wouldn't set right. Willow, for her part, threw herself into rejuvenating the garden, using knowledge her mother had passed down. She kept the cabin clean, cooked meals that Grant praised with genuine appreciation, and slowly began to feel useful rather than merely tolerated. They maintained a careful distance. Willow slept in the small room off the kitchen that Grant had cleared for her, while he took the main bedroom. He never entered her space without permission, never commented when she flinched at sudden movements, never asked about the nightmares that sometimes woke her screaming. A week passed, then two. The bruise on Willow's face faded completely. Color returned to her cheeks and weight to her frame. She found herself smiling at small things, the antics of a litter of barn kittens, the way Grant's horse nudged him affectionately each morning, the satisfaction of seeing her first seedlings push through the soil. But fear lingered like a shadow at the edges of her consciousness. Each rider on the distant road sent her ducking into the house. Each night, she lay awake wondering if Aaron was getting closer. Grant noticed but didn't pry. Instead, he began teaching her things: how to handle his old revolver, how to saddle a horse properly, which trails lead wear. Knowledge was power, and they both knew it. On a warm evening in late May, they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Grant whittled a small piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced precision. My real name is Willow, she said suddenly. Willow Reed. Or it was before I married. Grant's hands stilled, but he didn't look up. Married, he repeated softly. To a monster, Willow continued, the words pouring out now that the dam had broken. Aaron Blackburn. He owns a cattle spread about 30 miles east of here. She touched her cheekbone where the bruise had been. This was one of his kinder marks. Grant's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. How long? 6 months. My parents died of fever last fall. They'd arranged the marriage thinking he was respectable. By the time I learned otherwise, it was too late. Willow stared at her hands, twisted together in her lap. I ran while he was away on business. He'll be looking for me. And if he finds you, he'll kill me, she said simply. Or worse, take me back. Grant set his whittling aside and turned to face her fully. Willow, he said, her real name sounding right on his lips. I won't let that happen. She looked up, surprised by the conviction in his voice. You don't understand. Aaron has friends, influential friends. The law won't help a runaway wife. Then we'll help ourselves, Grant replied, his green eyes steady. This is my land. You're under my protection now. If he wants you, he'll have to go through me. The fierceness of his declaration should have frightened her, but instead, Willow felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since fleeing the cabin, she allowed herself to hope. That night, Willow slept soundly, without dreams of pursuit or capture. She woke to birdsong and the distant sound of Grant chopping wood. The days grew longer, warmer. June brought wildflowers that Willow gathered for the table. Her garden flourished under her care, promising a bountiful harvest. And something else grew too, a feeling she'd thought beaten out of her forever. Trust, perhaps even more. She found herself watching Grant when he wasn't looking, the way sunlight caught in his hair, how his shirt stretched across broad shoulders as he worked, the gentleness in hands strong enough to break a wild horse. He never demanded, never presumed, never took without asking. And Grant watched her too, she knew. She felt his gaze follow her across the yard, sensed his smile when she laughed at some small joke. But he kept his distance, letting her set the pace of their strange, careful dance. On a sweltering afternoon, Grant taught her to swim in the creek that ran along the eastern edge of his property. Willow, dressed modestly in a chemise and skirt, stood nervously at the water's edge. "I don't know about this," she hedged, eyeing the clear water with suspicion. Grant, already waist-deep in the creek, grinned up at her. "Every rancher's wife should know how to swim," he said, then froze, color rising in his face. "I mean, everyone should know, it's a useful skill." The slip made Willow's heart flutter strangely. She covered her confusion by wading cautiously into the water. "It's cold," she gasped. "You'll adjust," Grant promised, extending his hands. "Trust me," Willow hesitated only briefly before placing her hands in his. His fingers were warm despite the cool water, calloused from work but gentle in their grip. "I won't let you go," he assured her, and he didn't. Not when she flailed and splashed, not when she accidentally swallowed water and came up sputtering, not when her fears momentarily overwhelmed her. By the time they emerged, dripping and laughing, something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening, as they sat by the fire drying their hair, Grant cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's a social in town next Saturday," he said, focusing intently on the flames. "Dancing, food. Folks from all around gather at the meeting house." Willow tensed. "I shouldn't, if someone recognized me. Pinecrest is 2 counties over from your husband's place," Grant reasoned, "and you look different now, healthier." His eyes met hers briefly before returning to the fire. "Happier, I hope." Willow couldn't deny it. The gaunt, terrified woman who had stumbled onto his property months ago was gone, replaced by someone who felt almost whole again. "Besides," Grant continued, "everyone will just assume you're my—" He trailed off, cheeks coloring. "You're what?" Willow prompted softly. Grant met her gaze directly now. "My courting interest," he said, the words careful but clear. Willow's breath caught. "Is that what I am?" "Only if you want to be," Grant answered, his voice low. "I'd never presume yes," Willow interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'd like that, to be your courting interest." The smile that spread across Grant's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. The social was everything Grant had promised, music spilling from the meeting house, lanterns illuminating tables laden with food, children playing tag between the legs of laughing adults. Willow, dressed in a blue calico dress Grant had purchased from the general store, clung to his arm as they approached. "Everyone's staring," she whispered nervously. "Because you're beautiful," Grant replied simply, "and because they've never seen me with a woman before." Indeed, they were greeted with curious looks and warm welcomes. Grant introduced her as Miss Willow, offering no surname for which she was grateful. The townspeople, more interested in fresh gossip than detailed histories, accepted her presence with minimal questions. Willow found herself swept into a world she'd nearly forgotten existed, one of friendly conversation and simple pleasures. The women pulled her into their circle, sharing recipes and news while eyeing Grant approvingly. The men tipped their hats respectfully, treating her with a deference that felt foreign after Aaron's cruelty. When the fiddle struck up a lively tune, Grant held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" Dancing with Grant was nothing like the obligatory, stiff movements Aaron had demanded at their wedding. Grant led with confidence but without dominance, his hand at her waist protective rather than possessive. Willow found herself laughing as they spun among the other couples, dizzy with happiness she'd thought forever beyond her reach. As the night deepened, the music slowed. Grant drew her closer, their bodies moving in a rhythm as natural as breathing. Willow rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For showing me that not all strength is cruel, that a man can be gentle without being weak." Grant's arms tightened around her. "Willow," he began, his voice rough with emotion. Whatever he meant to say was lost as the meeting house door slammed open. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, his massive frame instantly recognizable to Willow, Aaron Blackburn. Terror froze her in place as Aaron's cold gaze swept the room, coming to rest on her with predatory focus. The music stuttered to a stop as he strode forward, pushing dancers aside. "Well, well," he drawled, alcohol heavy on his breath. "Found you at last, wife." Whispers erupted around them. Grant stepped partially in front of Willow, his body tense. "You've got the wrong woman," he said evenly. Aaron sneered. "Like hell I do. That's my property you're pawing at, mister." "I'm not your property," Willow said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Not anymore." Aaron's face darkened dangerously. "A marriage certificate says different. Now come along before I drag you out by that pretty hair." Grant's hand moved to the revolver at his hip. "The lady's not going anywhere she doesn't want to." Aaron barked a laugh. "Lady, that's rich." "You don't know what you've taken in, friend. A thief and a liar who stole from me and ran like a coward." "The only thief here is the man who stole 6 months of my life," Willow retorted, stepping out from behind Grant. "The only liar is the one who promised to honor and protect me, then used his fists instead." The townspeople were watching now, faces growing hard as they took in Aaron's menacing stance and the fear evident in Willow's eyes despite her brave words. "This ain't your business," Aaron snarled at the onlookers before refocusing on Willow. "One last chance. Come home now and maybe I won't beat you within an inch of your life." "She is home," Grant said quietly, deadly serious. "With me." Aaron's hand dropped to his gun, but Grant was faster. In a fluid motion, he drew and aimed, not at Aaron's chest, but at the floor between them. "I don't want bloodshed," Grant said calmly, "but make no mistake, she's not leaving with you, not today, not ever." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "You willing to die for a whore who spread her legs for the first man who offered shelter?" The insult hung in the air for only a heartbeat before Grant's fist connected with Aaron's jaw, sending him staggering backward. Aaron recovered quickly, launching himself at Grant with a roar of rage. The two men crashed into a table, sending food and dishes flying. They grappled, each landing blows that made Willow wince. Grant fought with controlled precision, Aaron with brutal savagery. When Aaron pulled a knife from his boot, gasps rippled through the crowd. The blade slashed across Grant's arm, drawing blood before Grant knocked it away with a well-placed kick. "Stop," Willow cried, pushing forward only to be held back by the town blacksmith. "He'll kill him," but Grant was holding his own. Despite the bleeding gash on his arm, he fought with the tenacity of a man defending not just himself, but everything that mattered. When Aaron charged again, Grant sidestepped, using Aaron's momentum to send him crashing into the wall. Before Aaron could recover, Grant had retrieved his revolver, aiming it steadily at Aaron's chest. "It's over," Grant said, breathing hard. "Get on your horse and ride out of here. Don't come back." Aaron glared, blood trickling from a split lip. "She's my wife under the law." "Not for long," came a new voice. The town judge, a stern man with silver hair, stepped forward. "I've heard enough to grant this young woman a divorce on grounds of cruelty. Montana territory may be rough, Blackburn, but we don't abide men who beat their wives." Aaron's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies among the hard-faced townsfolk. Slowly, he climbed to his feet, his gaze fixed venomously on Willow. "This isn't finished," he warned. "Yes, it is," Grant countered, his revolver unwavering. "Because if you ever come near her again, I will kill you. That's not a threat. It's a promise." Something in Grant's tone, the absolute certainty, perhaps finally penetrated Aaron's rage. With a last hateful glance at Willow, he stalked out of the meeting house. The moment he was gone, Willow rushed to Grant's side, hands trembling as she examined his injured arm. "You're hurt," she fretted. Grant cupped her face gently. "Are you all right? Am I all right?" Willow repeated incredulously. "You're the one bleeding." "Worth every drop," Grant said softly, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. The town doctor stitched Grant's arm while Willow sat with the judge, explaining her situation in halting words. The old man listened gravely, then promised to file the divorce papers immediately. "That man won't trouble you again," he assured her. "Word travels fast in these parts. By morning, every ranch hand and lawman for 100 miles will know what Aaron Blackburn did. His name is mud now." It was well past midnight when Grant and Willow finally began the ride home. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Willow rode close beside Grant, her heart lighter than it had been in memory. I'm sorry about the social, Grant said, breaking the comfortable silence. Not exactly the evening I'd planned. Willow smiled, reaching over to touch his hand. You fought for me. No one's ever done that before. I'd do it again, Grant said simply. 1,000 times if necessary. When they reached the ranch, Grant helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. In the moonlight, his face was shadowed, but his eyes gleamed with an emotion that made Willow's heart race. Willow, he began, what I started to say earlier before we were interrupted, I wanted to tell you that I love you. I think I have since you first appeared at the edge of my property, looking like a half-drowned sparrow. Willow laughed softly at the description, even as tears pricked her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I was just afraid to trust it, to trust myself. Grant's hand came up to cradle her cheek. You never have to be afraid again. Not of me, not of him, not of anything, I swear it. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that belied the strength she'd witnessed earlier. Willow melted into him, finally understanding that gentleness and strength weren't opposites, they were two sides of the same precious coin. 2 months later, on a perfect August morning, Willow Reed became Willow Isaiah in a simple ceremony at the same meeting house where she had confronted her past. The townspeople who had witnessed her darkest moment now shared in her brightest, filling the small building with warmth and well wishes. As Grant slipped a ring onto her finger, not a shackle, but a promise, Willow looked into the eyes of the man who had shown her that love didn't have to hurt, that protection didn't mean possession, that strength could be kind. I take you, Willow Reed, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Grant vowed, his voice steady and true. To honor and cherish in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. Words so similar to ones she'd heard before, yet worlds apart in their meaning. This time, Willow believed them with her whole heart. That evening, as the harvest moon rose over their ranch, their home, Grant carried her across the threshold, both laughing at the old tradition made new by genuine joy. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and each other, Willow traced the scar on Grant's arm, the permanent reminder of a man who had fought not to control her, but to free her. What are you thinking? Grant murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. That some journeys worth taking are the ones we never planned, Willow answered, snuggling closer to the heartbeat that had become her anchor. And that sometimes we find home in the most unexpected places. Grant's arms tightened around her. Welcome home, Mrs. Isaiah. And in the gentle strength of his embrace, Willow knew she was exactly where she belonged.